A lot of people think that vaccines are not natural, that they're artificial, and that is actually false. It's vitally important that we learn about the history of vaccines because we need to understand how they can help us. Your body is not being changed by the vaccine. Your DNA is not being changed by the vaccine. The vaccine is simply working off something that developed hundreds of millions of years ago in our very earliest ancestors. The point is that vaccines have a history behind them. You see, for the last 10,000 years, we've been busily domesticating all these animals around us to make everything a little bit better for us. But the knock-on effect is that we actually have developed diseases from domesticated animals actually account for an awful lot of our deadly pathogens today. Influenza, which comes from chickens.
Still remains within the sound of silence.
So if that's the case, why do we associate with these animals? Well, it's because their benefits vastly outweigh their negatives. And I quite like eating chicken. In 1796, a Frenchman named Jenner, who may or may not have been related to the Kardashians, and I have no inclination to find out, he discovered an actual causal link between animal disease and human disease. You see, Jenner noticed that people who spent a lot of time in close proximity with cattle and horses, such as stable hands and milkmaids, never developed smallpox. Smallpox had killed hundreds of millions of people worldwide. It is a very, very nasty disease. Jenner discovered that if he took blood from the cattle with cowpox and he gave that blood to willing participants, local youth mostly, and then exposed them to smallpox, they did not develop smallpox. He figured that horsepox and cowpox, which we now know as foot and mouth disease, was so similar to smallpox that the body thought that it had been exposed to smallpox and couldn't tell the difference. This is how vaccines work. They work by tricking the body into thinking that it has had a disease that it has not had. You're saved from having the deadly effects of a disease by being exposed to a weaker version or similar version to the actual pathogen. That's how vaccines work. Anything you may have heard about vaccines changing your DNA is simply not true. So vaccines work by piggybacking off your body's natural immune system. Your immune system has the primary immune response, which is where it's exposed to a pathogen, and it fights off that pathogen by building up antibodies, and that is your secondary immune response. Once you've been exposed to a pathogen and it has gone through its life cycle inside your body, you can't necessarily get that again. It's not foolproof. There are people who cannot develop their own immunities, and that we'll get onto in a second. Vaccines, however, are natural piggybacks of your system. They're not changing the system. They're not making you sick with the very thing that you're trying to avoid. They're making you a little bit sick so that you will be a lot stronger later on. So, what becomes of those people who can't become immune by themselves, whether through some natural non-immunity or because they're very old or very young? Your babies under 3 months are particularly vulnerable because they have very little defences of their own and they can't be vaccinated at that age. So how do we look after those people? A secondary part of the vaccine theory is what's called herd immunity. Herd immunity is where you build up enough of a vaccination program in the community that it protects the weaker members of the herd, hence herd immunity. So how does vaccines and herd immunity and chickens all relate back to the global community? Well, the thing is that these pathogens have no respect for national borders. They simply infect, and they try and thrive and survive, just like any other living thing on the planet. And we try our best to stop them, because they make us so very sick and might even kill us. It's important to remember the pathogens have been with humans for as long as there have been humans. There's always been bugs that are trying to damage us in order to replicate themselves. We have the technology now, within this past 200 years, to tackle a great many of those terrible pathogens.
So what does this mean to people who don't want to vaccinate their children? Well, the World Health Organization sees the opting out of vaccinations by people around the Western world to be one of the major challenges of the 21st century. Diseases that were considered extinct or so rare that they would never pop up are actually coming back. We have new cases of measles, which was almost eradicated. We have new cases even of smallpox. And the problem is that it's not just you and your family who are at risk. You see, my wife has no natural immunity to measles. She's just one of many people who, if exposed to it, could potentially die. And that's why herd immunity and vaccinations are so important.
So why have I been showing you shots of my chickens and shots of my veggie patch? It's because I want to show you that we're all in this together. This is my home. And of course, this planet is all our homes. We only have the one planet.
You might worry about the effects that vaccines are going to have on your own family, but you've also got to think of everybody else's. And vaccines have done more to save human life than almost anything else in history. They're quite simply so spectacularly beneficial to humankind. You really have to get on board. So please, talk to your doctor, trust what your doctor has to say. You'll be helping us all out.